Police was everywhere. They were opening new judicial cases against anyone, and people was meeting in this secret without mobile phones and so on. And we were also accused of terrorism. And that's crazy because I mean, how can you do terrorism by writing code?
But like it's really important that we have like autonomous spaces, no, and also like that we can take advantage now that we are still like kind of like in peace to have this technology evolving, because I think like a good voting system, for example, is like a good privacy, no, like seems like no one cares about privacy until you have to care.
Yeah, it's like a choice of who do you want to be disappointed by.
Yeah,
A corporation is just basically a dictatorship. I mean, it is the dictatorship of the shareholders.
in digital voting, bribery and coercion can happen at large scale.
I'm really scared about the last things that are happening in Europe, US, and so. Like this week, also the decision of Apple to accept the UK government like request on adding a backdoor on, for example, end-to-end encryption of iCloud.
Well, hello everyone. You're listening to the Blockchain Socialist Podcast. I am Josh, and I am here with Ferran Reyes and Pau Escrich, who are the Vocdoni co-founders. Vocdoni, in case you don't know, is a really interesting protocol that has facilitated voting, basically, without the state. That's kind of, I think, the like one sentence summary I can put out there is how I understand it. But it's a project I've been following for a while. It's been pretty interesting just because it exists in a real context of kind of pushing back against the state, specifically in Catalonia. So yeah, I'm excited to get into this. I think maybe just to start off, if you guys want to introduce yourselves, Ferran and Pau, and then we can go from there and talk about Vocdoni.
Hi, Josh. Yeah, thank you for inviting us today. I'm Ferran Reyes, and I'm co-founder of Vocdoni and also like working on the communication side. And yeah, we have been like for 6 years working on Vocdoni and to make this voting protocol that we can explain more now.
Hey, Josh, thank you for having us here today. Yes, my name is Pau, and I've been working in Vocdoni for the last 6-7 years already. I started it back in 2018. I've been working in distributed systems. I am a computer engineer for the last almost 15, almost 20 years. I discovered blockchain back in 2011, and it blew my mind. And from that moment, I just wanted to try to find interesting use cases for this amazing technology. So, yeah.
Yeah, nice. I think definitely one of those use cases is that I have always been, fascinated with, and I think like deserves a whole lot more attention, beyond the kind of financial speculative sides of the cryptocurrency space or I think just kind of like over focus on money and over focus on like coin price going up, like a space where I think there is kind of fairly, objective kind of space for like interesting experimentation and good, but doesn't get as much maybe attention and funding, is voting. So maybe if you guys want to explain, like maybe let's start high level, kind of what Vocdoni is and how it differentiates itself from kind of traditional voting systems, and then let's get into like the story behind Vocdoni. You've explained it to me before we started recording a little bit more in detail, but it's a fascinating story and it's like rooted in an actual kind of political movement in Catalonia. So maybe we can start like that.
So basically, Vocdoni, as you were saying, like it gets born in Catalonia after the Catalan referendum experience. Like, as you may know, in Catalonia, we have a really big community of people interested in the centralized technologies. Like, we have been like pioneers in open source software, also in the Linux ecosystem. We have really good cryptographers and also like the UPC University, for example. And we had also, like, as you know, a culture, a heritage of anarchism, cooperativism, and many like alternative ways of living, let's say, and making economy different. So we have been building, or we are attracted by these technologies that allow a different world to be built. So after Catalan referendum 2017, we had many people like meeting in meetups, no, and all the other spaces from the Web3 ecosystem, and we were thinking, wow, so we built an alternative financial system so that people can participate, can, let's say, vote with their money, but that's not how humanity works. Like the financial side of humans, or the economic side of humans is one side, but we have many other ways that we can participate in society, no? And that's when we started thinking. We just had this referendum that was like stopped by repression by the Spanish state. Why we can't have the same that Bitcoin built now that Ethereum is also building, but for other types of governance, not like voting. So we can have voting with the same attributes as crypto, no? Let's say it's censorship resistant, it's verifiable, so anyone can see what's going on there. We're also like starting to have some anonymity, primitives there being built, and that's also an important attribute for voting. It's permissionless, no, and we were starting to build Pau with other people that were enthusiasts, and they were techies. I'm not. They started to design like a new protocol for voting based on Web3, but always having in mind that this should serve society. So even if we're building with Web3 technology, we always had people in mind, not people, but I mean the people that is already having cooperatives, associations, little towns, that they can do a referendum quick, no, having this as a target. And yeah, that's how we started.
Yeah, I would like to correct one thing that you said, Ferran, is that the referendum in Catalonia, it was not blocked. There were 2 million, I think more than 2 million people that voted, with all the police trying to avoid it, and all the the cyber and cyber institutions in Spain trying to also block it through the internet. So it went well, but it was a very good opportunity for us, for the people who were around that context, to understand what are the tools that a state in the first world have to try to block this kind of popular initiative. So we learn a lot at that point, what they can do, what they cannot do. And I would say that was the seed to start thinking about how, using current blockchain technology, can we build something that is actually censorship resistant, not only in the paper, but in the reality.
Right. Yeah, I think what is really fascinating. So I mean, just to shill myself a little bit, back in 2021, I want to say, or 22, I wrote a blog post called Anarcho-Syndicalism and DAOs, where I use the history of Catalonia in the Spanish Civil War and their history with anarchism and anarcho-syndicalism as being this really interesting historical model, or framework, or just inspiration for what kind of the ideal of DAOs should be. So anarcho-syndicalism, kind of very quickly for people in case they don't know, is just this idea, kind of political movement of workers taking over industry, taking over businesses, and running it themselves as kind of giant cooperatives, and they govern themselves via that position of owning the means of production through cooperativism. And I think what is very fascinating is that Catalonia, because it already exists in this context of kind of being in itself fairly economically powerful in relation to the rest of Spain to some degree. it allows itself some amount of autonomy, and it has its own history and language in the face of kind of Spanish fascism, which existed for some like 30 to 50 years. I can't remember exactly how long Franco's regime was, but a kind of like a kind of horrific end to the Spanish Civil War, while Catalonia and Catalans were kind of oppressed for a long time. And then we had the transition to democracy for Spain, which was, for plenty of people, if you look into it, it's not that much of a transition. It's largely paint over kind of the existing institutions of its time, and the same people were in power over it. But I think given this context, it somehow breeded a wonderful kind of space of innovation when it comes to taking seriously democracy, and democracy that is resistant to repression from the state, and trying to find alternatives to specifically the state whenever, in this context, the Spanish state was kind of like the main oppressor for Catalonia. So maybe I think it would be interesting if you want to go into some of the obstacles in the story that you guys have in creating Vocdoni. You've had, the Spanish government has gone after you guys in various ways, but if you guys want to tell that story.
Yeah, sure. And back in 2018, after the referendum in Catalonia, there was hunting for a political hunting against independent activists in Catalonia. So, police was everywhere. They were opening new judicial cases against anyone. And people was meeting in this secret meeting without mobile phones and so on. So when we started Vocdoni, we knew that would probably not it's gonna be something that is not gonna like to the current establishment of the Spanish government.
Yeah.
So we also, it was a difficult start, because even we were not doing anything illegal, we feel like we were doing something illegal. And of course, we were only building open source technology, and our purpose was to build something that can be used by anyone to express an opinion. But yeah, that moment was hard. Finding funds was also hard because people was scared in general. They didn't want to support projects, activist projects like this at that moment because they could be persecuted. And so, yeah, we had some hard time at that moment. But we went through. And we achieved what we called a seed round that was more like a crowdfunding from people around Catalonia that helped us to actually start to build something in a more professional way. That was in 2019, and then we built this voting protocol, which is layer 1 blockchain, based on technology called Tendermint. And we started using it in real use cases because at that time in Catalonia there were many organizations that wanted to vote. I mean, voting was like a very important primitive in the Catalan society because we came from the referendum experience, and everyone was like, we want to vote about everything. So that was also a very good context for Vocdoni to test as a playground, to test what we were building. So we had this first voting, for instance, with 30,000 people. And then we had more and more and more and more. And that got very interesting because it allowed us to gather all the information about what the standard citizen actually needs in order to be able to participate on these complex systems, because at the end Web3 and blockchain are very complex systems. So our motto was always make something which is Web3 in the backend, but Web2 in the front end. And I know this is now also the Farcaster motto, but we were using it already in 2019-18. So we put a lot of efforts on building this very simplified UI with a Ethereum wallet hidden behind the front end, a completely very easy to use experience on voting and so on. And then at some point we were out of money again, of course, because we raised 200 keys in 2019, and that was good. But if you need to pay salaries, we were growing as a team. We were already like 10 developers, so we needed more monies, and then we started a kind of funding round. And that was hard because voting it's conceived in the outside of Catalonia. I mean, if you go to other countries to find money for voting, they see it as a very interesting thing, but something in the long term. So it's an investment for the next 10 years, let's say. And most of the VCs and the investors are looking for investments at short term, like 1, 2, 3 years maybe.
How am I supposed to get
we
my
were struggling.
100x, you know, in
that
in a
was
year
the thing.
on voting?
Yeah. So that was hard, but we finally found funding. It was more an acqui-hire. We were acqui-hired by Aragon, the DAO framework, because at that point they needed something for off-chain voting, because voting on-chain was very expensive, and we had this solution which was off-chain. It's not off-chain. I mean, we had our own blockchain, so it's a kind of on-chain voting, but you don't need to pay for gas because it's our blockchain. So we decide how expensive are the transactions and so on. And then they acqui-hire the whole team and the project, and Vocdoni then was a side project of Aragon. But then Aragon in 2023 disappeared, so now we are back in our own.
Right. And the obstacles, I would just to get through this, like, we're not just a difficulty of finding funding for something that is, like, for everyone obviously a very important thing, but not an obvious kind of like return on investment by VCs, of course. I think the kind of other types of things, I don't know if you want to talk about, but like there were obstacles imposed by the government, imposed by people with significant state power, who also were pushing back against Vocdoni. I don't know if you want to talk about that a bit.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, we were targeted with tools like Pegasus.
Pegasus is like the Israeli software, like spyware kind of system that like knows everything that you're doing, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. And we were also accused of terrorism. And that's crazy, because I mean, how can you do terrorism by writing code? I don't understand. But yeah, we were. I mean, if they accuse you of terrorism, then they have a lot of freedom on what kind of tools can use for go against you. So that was what they use in order to be able to use Pegasus and Candiru, which is another spyware also. And of course, all the phones were how do you call it? Were
infected?
No, in fact, I mean all the lines, the standard lines, the voice
like tapped,
calls were
recorded.
they were tapped.
Yeah.
Yeah. even my parents
Yeah.
and some of my friends that had nothing to do with
Right.
Vocdoni or technology in general. And I think at that time they were very scared of something like Vocdoni because the referendum had been something very dangerous for them. I mean, I think the Catalan people, was very close to actually achieve a real independence at that moment, and 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 so they were like shooting everywhere, and
Right.
of
Right.
course we were one of the targets, and also all the newspapers, not all of them, but most of the establishment newspapers and televisions were also talking about Vocdoni with lies, like accusing us of being related with Soros. We are not, of course, and many other things, like, of course, all the story with Russia and Putin and everything that is considered like
Right.
the bad guys in the world. We were somehow uh,
Right. Right.
attached to them.
Yeah. You were somehow at the same time extreme right and extreme left, and everyone across the
Yeah,
political spectrum has some reason to like hate you and be afraid of you
yeah.
or something. Yeah, of course. Yeah. No, this is
There
like
are
a.
very nice pieces of that, of I mean, newspaper pieces of that moment. For instance, they were making the relation Ethereum. We are using somehow Ethereum, so we are related to Ethereum. Ethereum founder is Vitalik. Vitalik is Russian, from Russia originally, and
Right.
so he's friend of Putin, of course.
Right.
So we are also friends of Putin. So
Crystal
this
clear.
kind of relations, like what?
Right.
Okay,
Right. Right.
I have nothing to say.
Sorry, you're canceled.
But
Yeah,
but this is I think like a good showcase, no, of, as Paul was saying before, of what the do when they feel like triggered, no, or menaced.
And threatened. Yeah.
Like we have all this literature, like like Hannah Arendt, or thinkers like that, that after the like the Nazism and all these like repressive systems like fall, no, like that they were like literally saying like centralized systems can lead to that, like can lead to control, can lead to repression, can suppression of dissident, no, like all these things. And I think because of like the kind of like a peace that we lived in the, not this end of history that we lived in the last
Yeah.
like 30 years, kind of like we forgot about that. But like it's really important that we have like autonomous spaces, no, and also like that we can um, have or take advantage now that we are still like kind of like in peace to have this technology evolving. And because I think like a good voting system, for example, is like a good privacy, like seems like no one cares about privacy until you have to care, no, but
Right.
like you need it. It's like even like a human right, no, like it should be like a human right in that sense. And yeah, and I think what happened in Catalonia was a good showcase of what can happen in like what we call like Western democracies in that sense, and how important projects like Vocdoni or being able to obfuscate transactions or things like that, no, or having some identity that has some privacy layer in front, so we can have we can't avoid political profiling or master. Like we saw what Cambridge Analytica were doing with Facebook. Like what can happen, like if
Yeah.
like as a voting system is like controlled by a state or by a central authority like a company, if they start doing mass psychological profiling in that sense, no, even not, you don't need like strong
Right.
repression, even that is already like
Right.
reason enough to have these systems.
Right. Yeah. With enough data and enough compute, you don't really need to repress. You can just nudge, behavioral nudging for sure.
Yeah.
No, yeah, so I think it's just like interesting for the audience to kind of understand the political context which this is coming from, and the kind of yeah, you know, because 90% of the crypto projects out there oftentimes come from just simply a guy who's trying to make some money. This is coming from a much different context, and a collective one, and one that's rooted in a historical political movement. But I think maybe we can move on. I would love to hear some specific examples of any kind of elections that have successfully used the Vocdoni protocol, and what impact did they have on their respective communities.
Sure, I can go ahead with that. Yeah, we have like our motto is that the voting protocol has to be like by default like good for everyone. So we are trying to make secure voting accessible to the masses. That's the most important thing because we also saw that when you like make things like for opt-in, like there may be reasons why people will just choose a weaker system, no? And I think if we can have a system that by default has like really good attributes, like we were saying, like censorship resistance, universal verifiability, and so it's good for everyone to have it. And of course, there are projects that will need more this type of systems. No, like for example, we had the Belarusian political opposition. Like I guess many people is familiar with the regime that it is in Belarus, with the president ruling already for I think, more than 30 years, and how like there is little chance for alternative politics there. And then the opposition, political opposition there, were building they are building an alternative government, let's say, like some kind of like what happens, for example, in the Spanish state during the Franco repression, no, that we had a government in exile, or also the Irish, this kind type of situation. And they have this council that is this alternative kind of like government, and they needed elections for that, and they organized it with Vocdoni because they considered that for two main reasons. One was it was the universal verifiability that allows to verify that all the process is being like done properly and it has not been like intervened or tampered, and also because it was censorship resistant, no, as you were doing an election there. So they built this app called New Belarus, also their identity system and so on. Around 7,000 people from Belarus voted to choose the Citizens Council for this organization. That was, I think, like one of the highest take votes we did. We also had last year, I think we were talking about this before, a vote with Esquerra Republicana, that is one of the biggest political parties in Spain in number of membership. And they held this election. No, it was not election. It was an internal voting in which members had to decide if they support or not Salvador Illa, that was the candidate to become president of Catalonia from the Socialist Party. That they are not independentists, but Esquerra Republicana is. So it was an important decision for them. And it was crucial because these will not only sustain the stability or not of Catalan government, but also from the Spanish government, because all these relations of support, I support you here and then you support me there, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So this was also a vote in which dozens of thousands of people were like involved. And that was also a really high stake because there were a lot of interest for this not to happen in one direction and the other. So it was prone to attacks and so. And then we had also like global voting, like Football Club Barcelona, for example. They use us for
That's
their
super cool.
for the board elections. As you may know, Football Club Barcelona is an association, is not a company.
Yeah.
So they had this, and they have members all around the world, no? So they needed this system that allowed for voting around the globe. And then we also had, for example, Omnium Cultural, that is the biggest cultural association in Europe. But they are like promoting Catalan culture, and they were also like promoting Catalan self-autodetermination interest. So they have also like hundreds of thousands of members, and they have been also always targeted by the Spanish state, so that was also high state voting. And then just to finish, we had also some referendums and votes in towns in Spain that are under the law of citizens participation, like consultancy and so, and they were also following the requirements for a vote that can be trusted and so, and we also organized that for some towns.
Nice. That was a lot of examples. When I listen to that, I hear very many different contexts in which kind of it is important to have this kind of input from a lot of people to provide legitimacy for what people wants to happen in some sort of collective. I think what's, one of the things that I think is kind of the purpose of voting in this democratic way is to provide legitimacy for actions. And of course, there are ways you can do this in which is kind of bullshit, but the point is to make systems in which it's not bullshit, and you have high trust that people are actually providing what are the things that they desire, what are the things that they want to happen, and they've been able to express that. And there are many different contexts in which that can happen, and I think for a lot of people, I think it's just so not normal to vote that they kind of feel like, what is the point of voting? I do it once every 4 or 5 years, and my vote is basically thrown away because the party that I wanted to elect, for example, doesn't go into power, or if they do go into power, they're not putting in the policies that I actually want. They completely changed their platform. But I think there is something very powerful in trying to make democracy normal. In the same way that I love people talk about privacy is normal. I think democracy is normal. That should be the norm in which people engage in democracy in kind of their everyday lives. And this is one way that this, I think, kind of happens. And I think is an important political tool to force the hand of those in power, so that there is a public acknowledgement. I think there's a difference, whenever, for example, if you had a legitimate kind of voting process that expressed that people did not like, X policy that is ongoing part of the government, in which it seems very popular because the government keeps talking about it and the news keeps talking about it. But then if you ask everyone individually, they're like, no, I fucking hate this. I don't want this. I don't want to be going to war or whatever the fuck it is. That's in my view, at least, a very powerful thing, and something that I think, having, therefore, non-state kind of directed and resilient technical systems for voting is super important. And you gave 10 different examples for where that could happen.
And let me add here that I do believe that we currently do not have real democracies. We have representative governments. So as you said, we vote one every 4 or 5 years to choose representatives, and then they do whatever they want to do.
Right.
To me, democracy is something different.
Yeah, it's a choice of who do you want to be disappointed by.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good definition.
And I think in small groups, real democracy is possible, but it doesn't scale to big groups of people. And the only way to make it scalable is through technology. And I do believe right now we have the tools in our hands, thanks to blockchains, and thanks to ZK snarks, Ethereum, and so on, to be able to create real democracies using the new technology. So to me, that was also one of the main motivations for working on Vocdoni. Now it's the moment. Now we have all the pieces that we need in order to build this technology that would allow democracy at big scale.
I think we lost.
So in Vocdoni, we not only support standard vote,
I can add
we
something
choose
to what
one of
Pau
the
was
people
saying,
in the
just
list.
as an example.
We
I
support
mean,
any kind of
with
voting.
Vocdoni, we are trying to do like secure voting, like accessible to everyone. Also, like because we are using economies of a scale, as we are using a blockchain, you don't need to deploy a system every time you need the voting. No, like everyone can, like just like in Ethereum, do you want to do a transaction? You do it. There is no, you don't have to ask permission. Like the system is there, is working 24/7, and so making it accessible and affordable means that, for example, in Catalonia, like we have this cooperative that is Som Energia, that is the biggest energy cooperative in Spain. No, when people vote in this cooperative, is the difference if they do it with a Google Forms or a Doodle, no, or if they do it with a
Right.
proper voting system. This means that they are doing some signaling to society. No, like they have dozens of thousands of members, and when they vote something, like for example, if they disagree with a law that is being passed by the parliament to say something, this means that they are doing a signaling, like all these thousands of people are like sending a message to the government, not like they're being a counter force. And we believe that a protocol like the ones that we're building at Vocdoni can allow for this recurrent participation, or recurrent voting, recurrent signaling. And that's because sometimes people, when they think about voting, they think about something that is boring and something that, as you were saying, like happens every 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
No? But that's a really limiting way of seeing voting or signaling. Like
Right.
there are other
Right.
ways.
In part, I think it's because we like with just corporate domination of most of the economy in most places in the world, like a corporation, is just basically a dictatorship. I mean, it is the dictatorship of the shareholders, and therefore, if that's the kind of economic structure that you are engaging with 99% of the time, in which there is no pretense that you will get any say in anything that happens in this productive asset, then you're not going to expect that in other places either, because it's like that is like what you engage with most of the time. So yeah, and I think we need to I think that the structure of society is kind of what like helps understanding the structure of society helps us understand and like think about what are like norms in the world, and to create new norms by having different types of organizational structures, different types of expectations, and just like providing the option at the very least to vote in things as like a normal thing, I think would kind of break people's like thinking around what institutions are and what to expect from them. But I did want to get into, maybe we can go a little bit into how exactly Vocdoni ensures censorship resistance, especially in these types of places where, political suppression is like expected, perhaps. What are the kinds of techniques that Vocdoni implements in order to ensure this type of resistance?
So on the protocol that we built in 2018, as I said, it was a layer 1 blockchain. So censorship resistant is achieved because we have nodes of the blockchain. So this is what is called a Byzantine fault tolerant blockchain, meaning that you need 2/3 of the network in order to make it work, but 1/3 can fail. So the more nodes you have, the more censorship resistant it is. To be honest, this has been I would say, the main issue of Vocdoni for the last years, because we were not providing any reward incentive in order to have nodes. So we had nodes in, let's say, friendly institutions like universities or foundations and so on. They wanted to contribute to the network, so they had one of these nodes running and so on. But it doesn't scale to big numbers enough in order to actually ensure censorship resistant. But now we are building a new protocol, which is called DAVINCI. Yeah, it stands for let me find it. Yeah. It stands for decentralized autonomous voting infrastructure with cryptographic integrity. And
Awesome.
yeah, it's a new name, so
Just
I
like Da
still don't.
Vinci. Was that planned,
Yeah,
or was after you made it you realized Da Vinci?
it's a mix of both.
Yeah.
Now, what we want to achieve with this new protocol is to remove all this layer of blockchain nodes, because
Mm-hmm.
nowadays we have this new technology, which is ZK snarks.
Mm-hmm.
It already exists in 2018, but it was in a very early stage, so it was very hard to use it. But nowadays you have even virtual machines that can execute any program in a ZK environment. So we're building this new protocol that it will be like a layer 2 for Ethereum. So you don't need coordination between nodes and consensus. You just
Mm-hmm.
need to trust in cryptography, because a ZK snark can prove that a computation is correct. So the participants of this layer 2 can just compute and process a number of votes in a single cryptographic proof and then send it to Ethereum, and a smart contract will validate that proof, and if correct, it will be added to the rest of the proofs. And so there can be many actors, decentralized actors. Anyone can be one of these relayers or sequencers, taking the votes, creating this ZK, aggregating them in a ZK snark proof, and then uploading them to Ethereum. And that for this system we are adding economic incentive through a new token that will probably come at the end of the year, something like that. We still don't know. But this is a utility token which is required in order to reward this network of layer 2 sequencers that will be processing the votes and creating the cryptographic proofs. So this is how we want to finally fix the censorship resistant issue. You are never 100% censorship resistant, so you can be the more censorship resistant you can, but there is always something that can block you. But
Right.
we expect that with this new approach, this new architecture, we will have a much higher level of censorship resistance.
So then, yeah, I think the thing with distributed systems is that there are never 100% guarantees in almost anything. You always have to kind of, yeah, like you can have like a 99% guarantee, or you can have like very, very low chance of, some issue occurring, but you can never have 100%, because like anything could technically happen in the world. And so I think it's interesting you guys had basically an alt L1, I assume using maybe like a consensus mechanism like proof of authority or something like this, as a
Yes, that's
Byzantine fault
correct.
tolerance, right? Which is interesting. I mean, it's yeah, one of the things that I've like always wondered about, or like thought of, if like imagine if I was like if I was actually a government and I wanted to create kind of a technical infrastructure in which I allowed like citizens to kind of like own a part of the infrastructure of the government in a way, by kind of encouraging citizens to run their own nodes for facilitating votes that happen within the government, or something like that. I think would be really, really fascinating. And of course, like one of those, there are many different types of implementations you can do that. The proof of authority, of course, is like it's a non-financialized one, but then you come with the issue over time, is similar to like Tor, like these types of decentralized systems, where maybe some people will do it because they believe in the thing itself, but there are less guarantees than if you were to provide some sort of economic incentive, which is, in part why blockchains have become so successful, and as far as providing security, because people can make money off of it. And so providing
Yeah.
like a little bit of financial reward for people to do it does increase the censorship resistance in the case of like, your partners are all of a sudden like, yeah, I don't really want to run the node anymore.
Yeah.
That's
And let
also
me add some.
Yeah, that's also important when adding this economical incentive layer. It's also that nowadays the world is ruled by state nations, no, that have like their laws and they use the monopoly of force, no. But we are still have like kind of like sovereignty, no. Like every state nation has their own enforcement, no. So allowing for to people to run their own sequencers or nodes, no, of network. It allows someone maybe to run a node in a country that is not friendly, maybe with another country, no, and that makes a lot of this brings a lot of resilience to a distributed system, because I think having nodes in different legislations popping up, no, I think that's
Right.
really important attribute.
Yeah, I wanted also to say something. Is that why in our layer one proof of authority solution we never release a token is because we consider that voting is cannot depend on money,
Right.
and that's an issue because in consensus systems the correctness of the logic of the blockchain depends on the consensus. So if 2/3 of the nodes of the network decided to change the rules of the system, they can do that. So if you have money, you have a proof of stake system, and you use it for voting, and you have enough money, you can buy enough stake or computation power, it doesn't matter if it's proof of work, in order to modify the logic of the blockchain and create new rules for voting. So this is why we never wanted to have a token on that network. We wanted to have it proof of authority, so we can choose trusted partners. They put their name, their reputation, and so on. But now with the new protocol, with DAVINCI, it changes because we are fully trusting in cryptography. So there is no consensus requirement there. So no one can change the rules. I mean, the smart contract that will verify the ZK snark proofs, it cannot be changed. It's immutable, and it also will. It also have all the security from the Ethereum mainnet network. So even if we have a token in order to incentivize the sequencers, if someone buys the token and try to perform some kind of attack, they cannot affect the actual voting. So this is why in this new context we accept to release a token. And why not in the past?
Yeah. I think now we've come to a point, the technology has progressed to where we can, you have the option now to borrow essentially the security of Ethereum, right? Where you no longer necessarily, you don't have to make the decision between, do I make my own financialized kind of infrastructure, or do I have a completely non-financialized infrastructure? You can find this place in the middle now where you can borrow the already existing security provisions of Ethereum in one way or another. There are like probably 5 at least different ways off the top of my head you can do this, and then you can provide a kind of like economic incentive for those who are partaking in it in a way that isn't like too financialized or whatever else, which I think is like, for someone who isn't like maybe deep in the weeds on the technical stuff, they're like, what does that mean? Like, this is like actually really important and really big implications. But I'm curious if you can talk a bit about, because some people probably, they may not know what ZK snarks are and what this type of cryptography is. If you want to maybe explain a little bit what that is and how that gives guarantees to people using the system?
Yeah, well, that's
Good
that's
luck.
hard to explain.
Well, maybe I can
And
give like the usual example of how zero knowledge proofs are explained, and then maybe you can add on to that to see if that's correct. Like the usual
sure,
kind of example that people give is whenever, for example, in the US you can't go into a bar unless you're over 21, and so you have to give your identity card. What that means is when you give the identity card to the bouncer at the bar, he is looking, he sees your name, he sees your birthday, he sees like your address, he sees what state you're from. He sees a whole bunch of information that he doesn't need to know in order to know that you are allowed into the bar, that you are over 21. The only thing he needs to know is that you're over 21. And so he gets a lot more information than he actually needs, and that means, in a system that is scaled up in like networked and technical, that means that like, people who are doing some sort of verification in which they see like all of your information at once just to verify one specific thing, means that they get to know a lot more about you than they necessarily need to know to fulfill some sort of task. So what ZK snarks allow you to do is you get to say to, for example, the bouncer at the bar, you can prove to him, I am over 21 with a legitimate identification, and that's all you need to know, and I can get into the bar. For example, that's
yeah.
kind of like the layman's way I've heard it explained.
I would say this is one of the nice properties of ZK snarks, but it's not the main property. The main property of ZK snarks is that you can verify a computation. So that will put you another example. I can prove you that the digit number 3000 of the B number is 3. And I will only provide a cryptographic proof, which is a very small cryptographic proof, and the number 3. And you can verify it, and you can be sure that the digit number 3000 of P is a 3. And you don't need to recalculate all the digits, You can just trust the proof and verify it yourself. And this is amazing because especially for distributed systems, because with this technique, then you can have a network of nodes, each one performing a kind of computation, and then you can just verify the proofs. You can distribute the work without having trust and without requiring consensus mechanisms. And this is, to me, the very nice property of ZK snarks. You can use it for privacy, of course, because then you can decide what inputs are public and what inputs are private and so on. But you can specially prove a computation and aggregate a lot of information in a single proof, very cheap to verify. And this is what allowed the ZK rollups and the layer 2 of Ethereum. So it's not the privacy part, it's more like this compression thing,
True,
so
yeah.
You can have 1,000 votes and compress them in a single proof.
Yeah.
Proof that all of them voted for some option, for instance.
Like the two main use cases I see is privacy preservation for like selective information sharing, and then the second one is like memory preservation, or like you're allowed to save so much space or so much computation or memory for computing things using zero knowledge proofs. There's another really big thing that maybe people who don't know the technical stuff may realize, but we're telling you there are really big implications for this.
Yes, there are.
Yeah.
I mean, it changed everything in distributed systems.
So in many ways, it's kind of zero knowledge proofs for you guys in the context of providing, voting systems. It means is it that effectively it means we can provide guaranteed voting, guaranteed in the sense of like you have high trust or high verifiability that these votes that are coming in that you are computing to produce like what is the full like results of the vote, you can have high confidence that this is real, that this is true, and it's not expensive at the same time. Yeah, am I missing something else?
I think one of the main threat of digital voting in general is, well, it's privacy in one side, but in the other is bribery or coercion or collusion. You know, like this is something that happens in traditional voting systems, but
Right.
it can happen only at a small scale. It cannot scale to big numbers in traditional systems. In digital voting, bribery and coercion can happen in at large scale. So this is the main issue for digital voting in general. And this is very hard to fix, because if you want to have a universal verifiability, transparency in the voting, you want to give a voter the option to follow the vote until the end, so to be sure that it was counted properly. But at the same time, you cannot provide him with a receipt of vote, because with this receipt, he could prove to a third party what he voted for. Then this third party can just bribe them and pay something if they voted actually his option. So fixing this thing was also the main focus for us when designing this new protocol.
It's tricky.
The DAVINCI protocol. The previous protocol is not resistant to this kind of attacks. The new protocol will be, thanks to some homomorphic encryption, ZK snark, advanced cryptographic techniques that we use.
Right.
I think that's quite new and game changer in digital voting systems.
Yeah, interesting. So then how do you provide, is it that you don't provide a receipt to the voter?
It's long. I mean, we have a white paper of
Okay.
28 pages that you can read.
Summarize it in one sentence.
Okay. So let's say that, yes, we do provide a receipt, but this receipt cannot be used by the voter. Let's say we use many techniques. Okay, one is called re-encryption of votes. So when you vote, you will have your receipt. You can check that your vote was actually counted. But after that, the sequencer will re-encrypt your vote, so you cannot use this receipt anymore to prove to a third party what you voted for. And then we also vote undetectable vote overwrite, meaning that you can vote as many times as you want through different sequencers or directly on chain if you want, without being detected. So you are kind of hiding your vote overwrite. So if someone is trying to bribe you, to give you money for voting something, he cannot be sure that if you casted a second vote.
So you're telling people, you're telling people to take the bribe and then change your vote afterwards.
Sure. And of course, but then probably bribery won't be possible on that system. So with this undetectable vote override, we avoid this issue. I mean, and yeah, it's not like a perfect solution to the problem, but I think it makes it good enough in order to not be a threat at big scale.
Right. Do you know anyone who's putting out any bribes just for just to know?
I mean, we know in like traditional voting in Spain, we have every election many examples of like people going, for example, to elder asylum. I don't know if it's called like that in English. Yeah, and then they take people
like an elderly home.
Yeah, elderly home, and then take people with buses and go to vote, and also like paying, even like a sandwich and things like that to the voters. So there's always people trying to bribe, and as Pau was saying, like in the digital world, everything is more efficient, the good and the bad. So if it's
Yes.
if it is a possibility, people will try to take advantage.
Right, right, right. That's super interesting. Yeah. More efficient evil over digital spaces. So we're running a bit up on time. I was wondering if there's any kind of last things, any final plugs that you guys had for Vocdoni. Are there resources that you want to point people towards? Your websites, your social media? What would you like to leave the audience with?
Sure. Yeah, like everyone is invited to follow us on social media. We are on Twitter or X. We are on Firecaster. We are also on Blue Sky, and they can visit also Vocdoni.io. This is our like main page. From there, they can also go to documentation if they're interested. And then we are launching like this week a new website, DAVINCI.vote, that is for this new protocol we're building. We are leading the design of this protocol, but we want to do it a universal voting protocol, so it's open to anyone to participate and collaborate and so on. And yeah, one last thing from my side would be like, it's really like I'm really scared about the last things that are happening in Europe, US, and so like this week also the decision of Apple to accept the UK government like request on adding a backdoor on, for example, end-to-end encryption of iCloud. Then we are seeing also Sweden moving. That has been like historically, like a safe space for technopolitical projects, like Mulvat and other Pirate Bay and other projects. We are seeing that they are also kind of like ban secure messaging, like Signal or the technology that uses Signal, also like for example WhatsApp. So I will encourage people to take more care about this. Also in the Web3 world, even on-chain voting, can be really scary and can't scale to the masses because, for example, it allows for easy political profiling. So I think we, as a free world, we maybe have to like go back a bit to the cypherpunk values and try to build more tools for resistance. That's what we're trying to do with Vocdoni. So like everyone is welcome also to support Vocdoni, to follow what we do, to be part even from the network when we were gonna launch it. And thank you very much for allowing us to have this space here to talk about it.
Yeah, thank you, Josh.
Yeah, of course. Thank you guys so much and appreciate all the work that you're doing. And yeah, wishing you guys the best of luck. Everyone should definitely check out their resources. If you guys are a part of some sort of organization that needs to do some mass scale voting, definitely look into Vocdoni.